Hello, Walnut. It is me, Laz, here for another episode of Walnut Wednesday. Just bear with me. I am pumping Vampire Louie. I'm trying to do napping, and my internet connection is very unstable. So lots of little dithery bits and bobs on the go today. And I've tried to angle myself so that I do not flash you. This is an aim to be part three of Vampire Louie's birth story. Well, actually, it's just the continuation of what happened when we got home in life after giving birth, basically. But also, I wanted to talk about my stance on my a little bit about my breastfeeding journey and where I'm kind of at now as well, hence the pumping, all the things. So where we kind of ended last time was when we just got sort of home, and I kind of gave the tip on making sure that you have a designated place because I didn't really have that. And so I was living, just to dive straight in, I was living in a sort of weird parallel universe where Geordie was sleeping in another room all the way downstairs, so I had to literally like call him if I needed help. Um, and feeling very like still just like I felt like I'd just given birth, right? Feeling very disconnected. Everything was weird. Like my life wasn't in the right order. I was sleeping on the wrong side of the bed. We had the heater blasting all night. Yeah, so Geordie wasn't sleeping with us. And everything just felt a bit chaotic and not organized. So that was one of my really big takeaways from all of this is definitely making sure that I have a spot where I can go to feed your baby basically because you're doing it every 2 to 3 hours. So I was basically for that whole time before things started to get a little bit rough was that cluster feeding happened, and then from that point, from that night of literally a sleepless night, as I alluded to in part two, I was waking every, no, not I, well, I suppose I was. No, I wasn't really waking. I was just there existing. Vampire Louis was waking every 2 to 3 hours, and he would cry, and that would mean I would have to do a nappy change and feed him. So during the daytime, we'd sort of make it work. I think we were in the lounge and would come upstairs, nappy change him. I would breastfeed him and then try and put him back down. And in the nighttime, same thing. It would be in my bedroom, go to the other room and nappy change him, perch on the end of my bed, and I had like a little routine going on, and then try and put him back down, and then I'd try and sleep as well. And I wasn't really getting much because it felt so frequent that everything was just so broken. And when you finally lay down to go to sleep yourself, racing thoughts. I was just thinking of all the stuff that I have to do and if I have to do it all over again. Um, so life was lived like that for the next sort of few days. And I was lucky enough I had like my mum was there because it was like a weekend, and there were a couple of days my mum took some leave to like just help me and be there with me and things like that. And then I sort of noticed, and I don't know how in order or linear this is, Walnut, because it just, like I said, felt like a fever dream. Like it was just survival. I was just existing. I was just being alive, but I don't really know. I wasn't really like in my brain, let alone in my body. Um, because you're still in shock. Well, I was still in shock from literally giving birth. I was saying to someone, I still when I like hold my baby's like head, when I like just touch it with my hand, I still have like a trauma response of that feeling of pushing out a rock melon in my butthole. Like I feel it in my by my butt. And like I have that feeling of like giving birth just when I like have his head like in my little palm. So it's like it's crazy, right? And I'm like weeks and weeks on from that now. Um, but I noticed in that sort of first week, maybe into week two, that Louis started to like fall asleep when I was breastfeeding him. And so we're doing all the things that were suggested, like wake him up, you can blow on their face, you can what's it called? Just do breast compressions to like squeeze out the milk more. And it started to make me feel like, oh, maybe I'm not making enough milk, or is that maybe he's just sort of self-soothing, all that kind of stuff. And it felt like because because he fell kept because he kept falling asleep, he it felt like he clearly wasn't getting enough food. So it felt like he was just feeding and feeding and feeding and feeding. And I kept crying because it just it got exhausting. It got really draining. And then the worst part about it happened, which was one of my nipples started getting very sore. My next tip is that um, I didn't know about nipple shields, which are basically like a bit of plastic you can put over your nipple, and people with like inverted nipples use them to breastfeed and things like that. But so I that's my kind of one hindsight thing is I wish I had given that a go. I wish I had more information or knew sort of more about them. But one of my nipples got really, really sore, so it got extremely painful to just breastfeed off of one side. And so I used to always be like, oh, just get the sore side over with so that I can get some relief on this side. And I think that's the kind of bit that put me a little bit over the edge. It wasn't the tiredness, it wasn't the surviving, it wasn't just the fact that that he was just a hungry little boy. It was actually that it got painful. That really tipped everything onto the other end of the scale. And I remember just having this anxiety and this looming dread um, about feeding because of how painful it was. People have described it as like glass cutting through their nipples and things like that. And look, I don't need to describe the pain to you. I'm sure that you can just imagine if you haven't had it before what it might feel like. But it is incredibly difficult to like give sustenance to your little vampire when you are when that source of sustenance is just putting you in incredible pain. It's like this weird, really, really weird feeling of like I need to carry on, but also excruciating. I can't describe it. And then you're tired and all of the stuff on top of it. So yeah, I just had so much anxiety. I cried so much more than the baby did. Um, and I remember like he was crying in his bassinet and my mum was there at one time and I just started bawling my eyes and she's like, "What's wrong, Bab?" And I was like, "I don't even want to pick up my baby because I don't want to feed him." And not because I wanted to starve him, but because I didn't want to have that pain. And yeah, it's weird like saying that out loud because you don't want to admit sort of like the thoughts like that, but the intrusive thoughts, Walnut, like craziness. Um, and I think it's important we talk about them because they're normal and it's okay and I'm okay. Um, and I also want to acknowledge that there is this normal thing that can happen to some women of like this impending doom that some women do get when they are breastfeeding or bottle feeding their baby. And it's like an actual thing. I can't remember the term of what it's called, but it is real life. So, like, these feelings, the blues, the anxiety, it's all incredibly normal and just not widely like talked about. So I have tried to be extremely vocal with it just to make it real, to make it normal, to make it yeah. So if you have a story, Walnut, I would definitely want to hear from you and let's talk about doom and dread more. Which seems a bit like counteractive, but like it's normal and it's real, right? Um and so I kind of got to this point where I remember sitting there just feeling like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to survive this. I don't know how I'm going to carry on. I was messaging, support network and asking for tips on breastfeeding and how they got through it and all that sort of stuff. And I remember them saying, oh, it gets easier from 12 weeks or even after 4 weeks, it gets easier. And I was sitting there and like, week two-ish, being like, I don't even know how I'm going to get through this hour, let alone get through to week four. Or a friend of mine said, oh, I only got to breastfeeding. I only made it to 3 weeks, so you're doing really well. And I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm far off giving up, like, and I couldn't even imagine at that 3 week or 4 week window. So I really, looking back now, do see why they call it the trenches because it is this really weird time to just exist and survive. And the only way through it is through it. Like I talked about in one of my first episodes recordings after I gave birth. But I was basically just this anxious zombie that had just completely lost herself. Geordie's actually started saying now that even I was talking differently and he was so concerned about me, but he didn't actually say it at the time. But I was just completely actual footage of being a zombie. That yeah, I just remember being like, I don't know how I'm going to survive this. I don't know how I'm going to get to I don't know how I'm going to get to tomorrow. And not having those sort of like I'm going to kill myself thoughts, but like it was just like, how am I going to do this? I don't see a way of how I'm going to do this. Like everything just felt like the heaviest, hardest thing ever. And I was just crying all the time. I was either crying or not talking and just staring into the abyss. Um, and then they got to this sort of point around that time where like there was all these always chats with my midwife. I was very open with her, but I was always wanted to sort of like get advice on formula and breastfeeding and what I should do. And I remember my midwife saying to me like oh, first of all, in that time, it got to like a little bit of a breaking point where Geordie and I were like, well, a decision needs to be made. We need to decide what we're going to do. And in the end, one time I was crying and I needed help to settle my baby. And Geordie was like, fuck this. And he got a bottle and got a formula. And we gave him his first bottle of sort of formula. I think my midwife was there actually. And the the relief I felt that someone had made a decision, Walnut, was so good because it was like, okay, now I'm doing this. Now we have to do this. And we didn't go straight to formula feeding or anything like that. It was just to give like me a little bit of a break. And so I remember my midwife, we decided to sort of um trial a thing over a weekend where it kind of just was Operation Get Laz some sleep and give a formula bottle like at nighttime or something like that. And where I would just pump just to give myself a little break. And my midwife said, do you enjoy breastfeeding? And I said, I don't feel any more or less connected to my baby with breastfeeding. I just feel like it's the thing that I'm doing. And she was like, okay. So we went to just trialing out the pumping because there's a risk if you go to pumping and you might want to breastfeed again, once you kind of like open the door to pump and not having them on the boob, it can kind of like mess with it and you might not be able to breastfeed again after you start. So there's this fine little everything feels like this fine little line and all these decisions and choices you have to make impact the future, right? And I mean that's still even now, I suppose. But it just felt so big and heavy and these choices that I had to like make um felt hard. So when Geordie was like, nah, I'm not having you cry anymore, and got the formula out for that one time, I just felt such a big, huge relief. So there was this weekend where we trialed the Operation Get Laz some sort of sleep, and I went to pumping. We introduced a formula. My vampire took to the bottle straight away, basically, which was really awesome. I know that that's sometimes not the case, so we were really lucky with that. And then it just started, we'll just try for 24. Everything was a 24-hour trial of all of these things, right? But with breast compressions, with doing this, with breastfeeding, and then got to the point where gave him the bottle, and then we tried for the first 24 hours. I'm just going to pump, give him the breast milk from the bottle, and give my boobs a break. And then got to the next 24 hours. I was like, that was kind of nice. I'm going to do it again. And then the weekend passed, um, and it was just like I'm just going to go. It was just in my head. I was just like, I'm just going to keep giving myself a break. I'm going to keep giving myself a break. And here I am, weeks later. I have been exclusively pumping, and he's been getting formula. We're at the point now, Walnut, where my milk supply has only allowed for sort of half and half. So like he'll get 3 bottles of breast milk and 3 bottles of formula. And that's kind of just where we kind of progressed onto. when Geordie went to work, so that was after the 2 weeks, I remember being so anxious and afraid and scared and nervous. That my mum actually stayed home for one of the days just to be there with me. And we made it through. I just remember it feeling like it was so scary, and I was like, how am I going to do this with Geordie going back to work? But you just kind of do. I just did. I just did. And I was really proud of myself. But I also had the support of the village when Geordie went back to work, and there are a couple of episodes where I sort of talked about that a little bit. But I just managed, and everything kind of worked okay. And it was that thing of like, for 24 hours, I'm going to do this. Okay, so for tomorrow, I'm going to do this. And just little baby steps, micro walnuttings, which were a day at a time. And that kind of helped manage my anxiety a little bit, which was really helpful, I guess. And so I went on to just exclusively pump, and I feel like Walnut, it's not intentional, but everyone in like the medical area, in my opinion, is so pro breastfeeding that I it's like almost they withhold information on formula and stuff like that. But what I've come to re and I felt like, oh, I'm not getting all the information that I need. But what I found out is that there is no information to receive. It is basically just up to your choice. And so I always felt like I was having to dig and dig and dig for more, when actually, when you want to go to formula, the instructions are on the back of the bottle and it's there. It's just up to your choice. And I wasn't in a brain capacity to make such impactful decisions at the time, like I am sort of now. And like, even with like a pumping schedule and stuff like that, that's where it got kind of like confusing, because I had to start to run a schedule on pumping to make breast milk and a schedule for Louie. And while at the same time trying to get a block of up to 4 hours of sleep. How the hell are you meant to do that running two different schedules when you've already got anxiety, when you're already like not far off the loopy bin? Um, like it was really hard, but the key to it was the only way through it is through it. So just keep going. And what's my 24-hour plan? What's my 24-hour plan? And I feel like maybe I am still running on a 24-hour plan, because I'm at the next phase of like my breast milking journey. Um, and so I feel like at the time that the decision was made to sort of introduce formula, introduce the bottle, start pumping, it was like I still wanted my baby to have my breast milk. If it's there, I know it's good, and I still wanted that for myself. So that was my choice to continue with pumping. I didn't feel pressured into anything or anything like that. But when I wanted more on formula and stuff, it just, yeah, like I say, there's just no actual answer. It's up to you to sort of choose. And the guilt that you feel, or that I specifically felt as well, from not breastfeeding and going on to giving him a bottle, and then even just to give him formula, like giving my baby something out of a tin, when because I'm a failure, that I can't feed him properly, or that I can't make enough um to give him six of the bottles, that instead of only three. All of these kind of thoughts just keep dripping in all the time, and when you're already anxious, they kind of just like sort of snowball. And I'm at a point now where I have been exclusively, yeah, I haven't had him back on the boob since that choice was made, since that 24-hour, yeah, bunny quotes, choice was made. And then now I'm kind of, Geordie and I had talked like, oh, at the 3 month mark, I'll stop pumping, and then maybe I'll be able to get a little bit of my life back. I'll be able to go outside for longer than a 2.5 hour, um, you know, outing, which is usually just to do errands. Have a little salve if I want to, without any issues, or not issues, but needing to express my milk and things like that. Um, but I think I am now at an area where it's I've had another walnutty conversation with Geordie, and we were like, oh, I'm starting to feel a little bit not myself again, creeping up. There's a little bit more tears popping in again here and there. Um, I'm kind of navigating now where maybe I will stop pumping earlier than the time stamp that was made up by me. It's not a rule book. It's not a in concrete be all end all date. It was just sort of like oh, the 3 month mark is sounds really good to us. That's enough. Um, so I actually started Walnut just after the conversation I had with Geordie this week. I've just started quiet quitting on the pumping, and I haven't announced it to anybody I haven't even said it really out loud to Geordie. He just said, well, just think about it. It doesn't matter if you stop pumping now. It's up to you. And I said, okay, let me think about it. And so I just yesterday, so my walnutting, this episode is part three, but it's also a walnutting. Just yesterday, I took one pump of my day out, and I think I'm just going to progress with slowly removing one pump and just letting the seeds fall where they may, just doing my 24-hour plan at a time and not making it mean anything about me, looking at the little small mils that come out of each pump into the fridge, and just giving him the breast milk that I can make, and formulating the rest, kind of like we have been. So now I suspect we're going to morph into having more formula bottles than a breast milk bottle, um, and not making it mean anything about me. And I feel like Walnut I have just been living and breathing this complete and utter contradiction because I have never felt like more of a failure and like a piece of shit, um, like I do now, while at the same time, like I do now, feel like an absolute rock star superhuman woman that I'm doing this. So it's this complete, how I always say through all of Walnut Wednesday, sunshine and rainbows, you got to have rain to make a rainbow. I love duality, I love polarity. I think you need both. This experience for me, Walnut, is just completely heightened it because I have never felt so low while also at the exact same time feeling so empowered and so in tune with my intuition. It's pretty crazy. And I think if you've been in my condition or position before, Walnut, I'm sure you can completely relate to that. And it's something that I have never fully embodied or experienced until after having my vampire. So um, this is kind of the part three where we've ended up. So my anxiety kind of just like skyrocketed, and it's really hard to talk about it in a linear form, like I said, because I was literally living by the hour and getting through it. And remember how I said, everyone said, oh, after the 4 weeks, it gets better. And I was like, how the hell am I even going to make it to like tomorrow, let alone 4 weeks? I'm now on the other end of it, where you look back and you're like, oh yeah, I can't even put it into like a big line. It was just kind of like this blur of an actual trench, being in the trenches, um, where it did get easier after the however many weeks. I'm nearly nine, I don't know. He's over 2 months old now. But now I am able to look back and kind of catch my breath, and it's still not easy. I still have no idea what I'm doing, but there every little day, every little 24-hour plan, every little experience where you learn something new, like every single day, Walnut, I've learned something new about myself, my baby, my routine is, everything. Every day is just a trial and an experiment, and we take what we know and we carry on. And all of those little experiments, all of the little trials, all of the little, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do something. Um, they build your confidence. And which is kind of just like basically Walnut Wednesday and having that like body confidence and self-confidence. It's just every little micro walnutting, every little test um, builds on itself. And yeah, so I can proudly look back and say I survived. I got through it. But I I struggled. I really struggled, and I don't know how I survived. I didn't really have any formula or tips and tricks other than the only way through it is through it, getting through it. And yeah, I suppose just talking about it and being very, very vocal. And even like now, where I'm starting this new change and doing my quiet quitting on formula, my pumping, sorry, is just being really vocal with the people that need to hear that, like with Geordie and like, I started crying. I was like, I'm not feeling good. I didn't have a good day. And that conversation started. But yeah, now it's just I'm just slowly taking one pump out and not making it mean anything about me. I'm not announcing it to anyone, so I'm not making it a thing so that my nervous system can sort of collaborate to what's going on, right? And then just weaning myself into the fact that we're going to go into formula and everything is okay. My baby is thriving, he is happy, he is healthy. Um, what I wanted was to for him to have my breast milk while it was there, and he has been having that and is still having that. And we're just weaning it down and down and down. As my milk supply has naturally just gone down. And I know with when you stop breastfeeding, that's a risk, and that sort of is what happens sometimes because pumping doesn't actually really reflect on how a baby feeds off of you, because it's the baby eating off your boobies that trains your boobs to make more or less or whatever. So it, a pump is sort of like the artificial version of that. So I got my wish of him having breast milk, and it might not be up to the 3 month mark, but it's a pretty good crack, and I'm just quietly quitting my way towards the 3 month mark and just letting my milk do what it needs to do naturally and organically, which is how I wanted my whole process to be like. And my whole condition was just sort of that go with the flow mentality, and that's what I'm kind of doing. So rather than making it me having made this big decision that I'm not pumping anymore, it's not that I'm not pumping anymore because I'm still pumping. I'm just quietly letting it go. So I feel like that's a big walnutting within this part three of 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 my birth story. So I feel like I have so much more to say on breastfeeding, on the whole thing, but I think more than anything, what I've gained in sort of telling the birth story and all these parts is that everyone has their own journey, and that these conversations are just important to have. And so I want to welcome you, Walnut, to the podcast to be as a guest for when I can get time and my schedule's ready. I would love to hear your birth story. If you had anxiety stories, breastfeeding journeys are like so interesting and hold for really great like discussions, especially on mental health. Um, and it doesn't have to be baby related as well. I mean, I know there have been situations and I've been just so, so anxious pre-condition, and how I accomplished them, or if it was just getting through and surviving them. So I want to hear your survival stories, Walnut, and when you've been brave. And I hope that you are brave enough to come and share it with me and let's chat. Because yeah, it's having the conversations that make it so that other walnuts can feel empowered to be brave enough and use their voices too. So let's do this together. Please make this your official invite to come and have a chat with me, and or just share with me, because I wanna hear from you, and especially for me on a personal level, if you've done this like pumping thing, and if you've quietly quit pumping, or if you've just gave up because it got too much, I would love to hear about it, have a little smack on my butt and be like, Liz, you can do this, you've got this, you're amazing. um because all of those things are sort of really, really helpful. So on that, I'm going to end this episode here. Thank you for being with me. If you've held on to the very end, I know it's been a bit choppy, as I paused to tend to the crying baby or the Wi-Fi connection or turned my breast pump off, but have a happy Walnut Wednesday. Have a great break. Drive safe, eat all the food guilt-free. You're amazing, you're beautiful, you're sexy, you're delicious, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.